Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to start off with thanking everyone for signing up for this meeting today. It's really important to all the staff in West Vancouver to get this sort of turnout and this participation. A little bit of background of how we ended up here. Back in late 2018, we were looking at developing a community wildfire protection plan for the municipality. We worked with all the stakeholders within the district and First Nations, and we hired a consultant, Blackwell and Associates, to help develop our community wildfire protection plan that was adopted in 2019. Just to note, we're one of the last municipalities in the area that hadn't actually done a community wildfire protection plan and started working on it. So this was a big step for us. It required incredible collaborative work within all of our divisions and working with the consultant. And from there came up over 50 recommendations that we're using to move to build the resilience within our community. And one of the big key components that we're doing is a fire smart outreach. We've worked with communications, and it's to really get the residents of the municipality engaged and working to help build resilience within our community by taking steps that they can do around their own properties to help reduce the travel of wildfire in the case that it actually does happen. The communications departments worked really hard in getting us out into social media. We've had in-person meetings now that COVID's kind of hiding a bit from us. We did town hall meetings with developers to discuss best practices when they're building in the interface. We came up with a wildfire DPA, which any building that's or rebuilding that's happening, and the interface will be looking at through the lens of the proper building materials, and even taking into account the vegetation that they plant in their gardens to help to build that resilience within the community. It's a huge project, and it's taken everybody to kind of pull on the oar the same way to get to where we are today. Next year, we're really excited. We're hoping to get a chipping program that's going to work in coinciding with the home inspections that people have signed up for. So we've had people go out looking at houses, giving them some direction on what they can do to build resilience within the vegetation and the management of their house. And then now we're going to go and help get rid of those organic materials with them. And also we're looking at working with the garden centers next year and then identifying the plants that are deemed sort of fire smart plants that we can plant in our gardens that will help to reduce the spread of a wildfire in the case that it comes to us. From a fire department standpoint specifically, so all those things are kind of a global district view. Fire department wise, we're trained to work in interface firefighting. We purchased one structure protection unit, which is like a trailer that has a bunch of sprinklers in it. We've got a second one on order, and that's to raise the humidity in the area where a fire is starting to move towards in a community, in our community. And we also work closely with the BC Wildfire Services and the Metro Vancouver Watershed Branch. We're doing tabletop exercises with them. And really what we're trying to do is we want to shift from a reactive state to a proactive state. We want to anticipate what things might be coming up in the future and how can we best deal with it, the inevitable, but then also we need to spring back quickly and get back to normal. So that's kind of a high level view of community wildfire protection plan. And with that, I'll hand it over to Bruce. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. My name is Bruce Blackwell. I have a consulting firm that's been in business for 35 years on the North Shore. I've been involved in hundreds of these community wildfire resilience plans. And we're currently, well, I should say we've been implementing fuel treatments like we're going to discuss today since 2005 in communities on the coast, including Whistler, Squamish, District of West Van. We're just starting something in the city of North Vancouver. So these treatments are not new. I think we've treated roughly about 200 hectares in the District of North Van, and we've treated a similar, well, actually larger number in the community of Whistler, and various amounts in other communities. We've also operated throughout Metro Vancouver. Why are we doing this? Well, you've recently seen, particularly in the last 10 years, that we've had longer periods of what we consider to be high and extreme fire danger. This fall was a classic example. We had several fires late in the fire season, one in Minikata Park in Coquitlam, one actually directly adjacent to where we're proposing this treatment. We've seen other fires recently in West Vancouver, the White Lake fire, which threatened the watershed in West Vancouver, and the Strip Creek fire, which basically was caused by trees touching a hydro right-of-way that had the potential to run all the way up to Cypress Bowl. So there has been recent fire activity, and with the changing climate that we're experiencing, a number of second growth stands on the North Shore pose a significant wildfire risk. So this project is largely focused on mitigation. And why do we want to mitigate? I'm going to show a short video that basically is put together by the Disaster Safety Org, the Insurance Institute for Homes and Businesses in the US. And really what we're worried about are ember showers. And so this video highlights the damage or the potential damage to houses from ember showers. It's not the direct contact of the forest fire with individual homes. It's these embers that are generated from the fires burning. And I'll speak to that a little bit more, but let's just quickly go through this video. It's about 2 minutes. I'm assuming everybody can see this.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, great. So basically they put together a test structure in a lab, and they put together, they put vegetation, bark, mulch, and other materials that's combustible into a generator and blow embers onto this house. Very similar to what would happen in the case of a wildfire, where we have wind, and once we get a fire that's bigger than 20 hectares, we can expect the conditions that you can see in this video. So they're planting a standard garden. This house is made up of different materials, materials that are vulnerable to fire and materials that are not vulnerable to fire. The roofing has a wood component. It has a component that is duroid, just to demonstrate how a fire affects these different homes. The thing to understand about West Vancouver, North Bend, and North Shore in general is most properties have a lot of trees on them. There's trees adjacent to their properties, and many of them are Douglas fir and other species that generate significant amounts of embers. So this is a 10 to 20 mile per hour generator. This is the kind of embers that we would expect from this fire. And you can see largely the house is engulfed in these embers. Dave talked about using sprinklers. We put sprinklers on houses to triage the environment, reduce the relative humidity, and when those sprinklers or when the embers fall into that relative humidity, they're extinguished. But that's really a tactical thing once a fire has gotten to a fairly significant condition. Fort McMurray fire in 2015 in what would have been a low to moderate fire regime, not really unlike West Vancouver in terms of its coastal climate, and it was completely burned down in an ember shower that was generated from a significant fire that burned in the spring of 2015. You can see material on the roof, the detritus from the trees burning along the roof seam. You can see the aluminum gutters melting. You can see the vegetation catching on fire, and soon you'll see the shake roof. And there still are a fairly large number of unrated roofing materials being used in West Van. So part of the home assessment, part of the focus of Fire Smart is to get people thinking about the vulnerability of their homes and making changes to their landscape, and potentially when they re-roof, they're thinking about rated roofing. And the idea is to make their housing envelope less susceptible to fire. Because if we don't get people working on the Fire Smart component of this, the fuel management, they have to go part and parcel. So we're really trying to work on all facets of community fire protection. And this is going on provincially, given the losses that we've seen over the last few years. So yeah, the siding in this particular building is what's called hardy board. It's a fiber cement siding, and it's resistant to fire. So that's the left side in the video. The right side is the vinyl siding, and you can see with these heat loads that it's melting. We expect heat loads in these type of interface fires to be in the forest. They're measured about 900 degrees C. So there's potential for a big heat load coming onto the house. In this case, you can see the attic has a gable. The mesh on here is not adequate to prevent the embers from getting into the attic or spreading into the home. On a fire smart home, we'd recommend 3mm mesh, which would limit the penetration of embers into the house. So this is there's a whole bunch of building recommendations. And here you can say a single pane window. Most houses are double pane now, but you can see how easily a fire escapes through a single pane. That's a living room with curtains, furniture. It's going to start the house on fire. So this was really an educational video and to validate what wildfire experts know about houses and their vulnerability to fire. So I'm going to stop this video and I'm going to move to my presentation. So bear with me for a second here, please. So you should see my presentation now. And you should be able to get it here. So we'll just swap it. So West Van has a significant interface that goes right to the water in a lot of cases and runs all the way up to the top of Cypress Mountain and into the Capilano watersheds, extends from the Capilano River all the way to Horseshoe Bay. So it's a large forested community where homes have been embedded into the forest. We worry about two types of fire events. We also describe the interface as both where the forest meets the community, an edge, or where islands of homes are built into the forest. Both of these circumstances put homes at risk. And we're also interested in what I described as that spot fire risk. Spotting can occur. In BC, we're using 2 kilometers as the measure of spotting. In Australia, with eucalypt, it's been measured at 25 kilometers under certain wind events. In Kelowna in 2003, there was spotting measured at 9 kilometers. We typically, at a conservative level in BC, are using 2 kilometers as a planning tool. And one of the things that people think about is a wildfire affecting the community and those embers coming into the community. But the bigger threat, I think, in West Vancouver is a human-caused fire. And that's a house fire next to the forest. A house fire gets tremendously hot and will start the trees on fire. In about 2013, we had a fire in the North Van district. There were about 17 trees surrounding the home up in Grouse Woods. The fire burned in November in a large rainstorm, and the house was completely gutted. And of the 17 trees, I think almost all of them except 8 were completely incinerated. So you can imagine that kind of a fire occurring in a July-August window, similar to the last couple of years that we've had when it's dry. And we've got potential for a significant fire. Dave referred to what's called a DPA, or development permit area. And what this refers to in West Vancouver is if you build a new home in any of these highlighted areas, you need to comply with the district's development permit area classification, where that new home has to meet both the landscaping standards and the building standards of FireSmart, which is the provincial and soon to be the national standard for fire protection around homes that exist in the interface. The goal of this is to gradually convert the building stock and harden it off so that if there is a significant fire event, that these homes are not as vulnerable and they're more easy to protect. So there are a number of homes under construction right now in West Vancouver that are complying with this new development permit area. As part of the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, as Dave indicated, we've highlighted a small pilot area to treat 6 hectares this year that is part of a larger 48-hectare area. This was identified in the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. The district applied for funding with UBCM, and a contractor has been hired. It's the same contractor, to be honest, that's been working in Whistler for the last, last 5 to 7 years, thinning in Whistler. And their purchase order has been issued, and next week treatments will begin, or the treatment will begin on the 6 area pilot area. It was decided to start with a pilot area to demonstrate to citizens what we're trying to achieve, how we're going to achieve it, and what the end results are. And the goal is to continue on with this work after this year's pilot is successfully completed. We're doing the pilot at this time of year because there's lower use at this time of year. We're outside of the breeding bird window. A lot of small mammals and things go into hibernation at this time of year. The treatment will take about 6 weeks, weather dependent. And the goal is to minimize the impact to the forest in terms of the treatment. There was a very detailed prescription that had to be developed for this. This prescription was referred to UBCM and approved by the fire specialist in the government and was funded through their program. So there's a rigorous review outside of the District of West Vancouver, not involving us as consultants, but that is conducted by the BC Wildfire Service. What are the treatment goals? Well, the treatment goals are to retain the healthiest and co-dominant canopy. What we're creating here is what's referred to as a shaded field break. And basically the idea is that we create an overstory that is still maintaining a cool and moist habitat. We protect wildlife features, wildlife logs, coarse weed debris. Only wildlife trees that impact safety will be removed, but if they're habitat trees, we try to protect them. And really, and we don't touch any deciduous trees. Deciduous trees have a low flammability and actually help to support a reduction in fire behavior. We remove, as a priority, the dead, suppressed, and intermediate trees, and we call this a thinning from below. And if there's some hazard trees around trails or around edges where people travel, those hazard trees will be removed. The goal here is really to create a stand condition that fire can't go into the crowns, which is difficult to control. It's safe for firefighters to actually go into this area and put the fire out. And we want to reduce the fine surface fuel load and the what we call the ladder fuel. So the ladder fuels allow the heat from the surface to go up through this intermediate level of trees and into the bigger trees on the site. I should also say, this is a second growth stand, largely associated with historic logging in the district. These stands are going through a phase of succession where they're thinning naturally. We're trying to capture that thinning before it falls to the ground, before it causes a fuel hazard, and accelerate succession to move these trees to a point where they will grow big, tall, and formulate the conditions of old growth. Old growth, big diameter trees, high crown base height, where these ladder fuels have been removed, has a low probability of turning into a crown fire. So really that's what the goal of the thinning is. This thinning approach is being applied broadly in Western North America in both dry forest and forest through Washington State, the interior of BC. So this is not unique to BC. There's a lot of studies going on and literature being produced about how this impacts the forest and whether it's effective. And the research from the last 5 years has demonstrated that this kind of treatment is very effective in reducing the intensity of fire, reducing the spread of fire, and lowering the difficulty of fire suppression. So this stand or the area of trees is mature Western hemlock with subcomponents of the Mablus fir, Western red cedar, and a little bit of Douglas fir. It has a high risk of fire ignition and fire potential. So if somebody was to have a campfire in there and leave it in the conditions like the fire we saw this fall, there's a very high probability that it could start a surface fire. The crown closure is very high, where the crowns are intermingling 75 to 95%, which means they hold the heat in and they would be susceptible to crowning or crown fire or fire moving from the surface into the crowns. About 50% of the trees are proposed for removal. That will open up light into the surface. As you can see in the photo, the understory is very depauperate of understory vegetation. It has a low, what we would consider to be a low biodiversity index. And the idea is that we would increase the shrub and herb cover by allowing more light to fall to the surface. And again, that would also reduce the surface fuel. The average density of mature and overstory trees is about 632 stems per hectare. And there are 3 seasonal watercourses. When we say seasonal, they dry up in the summer, but they're wet in the winter. These are also protected as part of the strategy to do the treatment. Here's some photographs of similar treatment areas. The goal of this treatment is to add to the right-of-way that BC Hydro there, so we have a bigger break in terms of fire moving out of the community up the mountain slopes, and vice versa, a fire moving down slope into the community. We're also creating an anchor point for the firefighting of both efforts of both BC Wildfire Service and the municipality. We're reducing overall wildfire behavior by removing fuel that would contribute to head fire intensity, which is the heat of the fire that really makes it difficult to put these fires out. We're improving emergency egress for public and adjacent trails, and we're doing everything we can to minimize the impacts to the forest ecology here. Our thin from below approach, the largest tree that we plan to cut, and there's only one of them, is 35 centimeters. And I think you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but here's that tree. This is a sample of a tree that's 35 centimeters. It's the largest tree that we will take out in this treatment area. There are others that are much larger. Typically, the majority of trees are 22.5 centimeters, the size of this tree, and lower, and the majority of the trees are less than 15 centimeters in diameter. So as you can see, these are not big trees. We are not removing anything that somebody would consider to be an old tree. The oldest trees in here, I think, are about 90 years old. We're not removing Douglas fir. We're removing mistletoe infected hemlock, similar to the kind of hemlock that blew down in Stanley Park in 2005. Most of the target species are hemlock. There's a little bit of red cedar and a Madel's fir. Those are shade tolerant trees that contribute to those ladder fuels in the understory. And we won't remove all of them. We'll leave, we'll just reduce the number of patches. But Western hemlock, for those who aren't aware, has been the target of a looper outbreak that's contributed to significant damage in Stanley Park, in Lynn Headwaters Park, and a number of isolated areas around the North Shore. It's traveled out into the valley and up the Sunshine Coast, and has done damage by reducing the component of hemlock, by encouraging the older Douglas fir and cedar to thrive and not be stressed by drought. We expect that the resilience of the stand will be improved. And our post-treatment density after we do the thinning, we expect it to be average about 480 in a range of 430 to 520 stems per hectare. And those are, as I indicated, the largest trees on the site. So we're not taking any of the healthiest older canopy and sub-canopy trees. And I want to make that really clear. There has been some questions about Douglas fir. Douglas fir is not shade, it's not shade tolerant. It doesn't grow in the understory. And the regeneration of the stand promoted a small number of Douglas fir stems that are in the overstory. We want to promote Douglas fir. We want as much Douglas fir here as we can have, and therefore there is no cutting of Douglas fir. So other considerations are there will be a danger tree assessment. So we hope to improve the risk of a tree falling on a target, which is the trails. We have done archaeological due diligence with the local First Nations, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish, and we have consulted with them. There is an invasive species management plan, which will focus on removing existing invasives and protecting against any new invasives. There is a water protection. We won't be doing any activities other than hand pulling small trees out of the water course. And again, if we do it at all, and there's no footprint or impact on the surface within any of those water courses. So that's in a nutshell what we're trying to do. This has been approved, and the plans are currently to undertake the work starting, I believe, a week after next, the week of the 15th of November. So I try to make that short and sweet and give you the basic information, and I open the floor up to questions. Thank you.